This is Michael Park for CreativeCow.net. This is part 2 of the Do You Feel Lucky tutorial. In part 1, if you watched it, we went through the process of creating a 3D shotgun pellet and going through particle flow, making that shoot at the camera, and also rendering out some trails which we're going to use as a distortion effect in 3D Max. What we're going for here is something that looks a little like this. Like I described in part 1 of the tutorial, we've got the pellets coming at the camera with the distortion behind them, like the pellets are rippling through the air. We also have the initial blast, the concussion wave going out, and some smoke. And we also have the time changing, slowing down in the middle. So I'm going to bring in my footage. So I'm going to import files, raw footage, and I'm going to drag this down to make a new composition out of it. There we go. And try to make this a little bit bigger so we can see it a little better. And now basically what we have is just the original footage going back and forth. First thing we're going to want to do is bring in our elements we rendered out. So I'm going to import, and I put them into elements, pellets. I'm going to import this as a PNG sequence and import my trails. So file, go up to your trails, and import, make sure PNG sequence is on, import those. Now if we take these and drag the trails down on top, and you'll see that if you scrub through the timeline, those trails are coming out the screen. Look kind of funny now, but just give me a minute. And then we'll drag and drop the pellets on top, and you see the pellets line up with a nice motion blur. And so it's looking pretty good. The other thing we're going to want to do is add some of the other elements like the muzzle flash and the smoke. So I'm going to go ahead and import, have rendered out from explosion and some smoke that I did from another program, Particle Illusion, and I'm going to drag and drop that on the timeline. And now what we need to do is go ahead and line up on about frame 20. We'll zoom in here a little better, and we're going to line up this explosion, drag the start of it to about right there. And so if we zoom this in, maybe go up to 100% for this, zoom this in, you can see the explosion. One thing, sometimes, especially out of Particle Illusion, you render it out, you get a weird aspect ratio of the pixels. So to fix that, you go into Interpret Footage Main, and you can see this is a real odd non-square. Just change it to square pixels, and that should take care of the problem. There you go. I'm going to change this to a add over top, and we will move the center point of this to the middle of the explosion, middle of the barrel there. It's a little high. There we go. We're going to put the explosion beneath both of these, and it creates a nice blast. And you can see the smoke kind of coming out right here. One other thing I'm going to do is to just give it a little more pop. I'm going to duplicate that layer. Now this one, I want to hit the scale and scale that up to about 170. And I also want to hit T for opacity and take the opacity down to about 40. So now when you're scrubbed through and you can see that explosion, it's a little bigger and it's a little brighter, and you've got this nice ring around. You can see there's a little color distortion here. I don't really like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Effect, Color Correct, or Color Correction, and CC Toner, and change the highlights to kind of a darker orange. Change the midtones to kind of a lighter yellow orange, and change the shadows to, once again, just kind of an orangey color. And that way it'll map that a little bit better. You're not going to have those weird color gradations. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to add in some smoke effects. I'm going to use some ink drops from Andrew Kramer's collection, the Riot Gear, and here it is right here. I highly recommend it. It's got some really cool stuff, as does all of his products. I'm going to use the drop 21 and 22 from the ink drop collection. I'm just going to take those and drag them onto my project window here. And I'm going to take these and drop one there. As you can see, they're black and white, so I'm going to change them to go to a screen. It's a little harder doing this with such a cramped work environment. As you can see, it looks pretty cool. That's kind of, the smoke is billowing out a little bit. I'm actually going to scale this up a tad to probably about 130%, and then I'm going to come back and drop the other one on top. You can see it's billowing out a little early. So I'm going to go to frame about 25, I guess, because it starts fairly big, and that way it will billow out after the explosion. Now go drop 22 in about the same place, change it to screen as well, and we're going to go ahead and solo the layer so we can figure out where it is, where the center point is. There's the center point, and we'll move that up. This is kind of a cool ring effect. So if we go back down, take a bigger look at it, it's got that kind of a ring effect, and I actually want this to come in a little later. There we go. You have more smoke. Alright, now we want to take both of these layers and drop them below the pellet and trails layer because they're going to be in the background. So basically just take them and drop them below, and I actually want to put them on top of the explosions. Looks good. Okay. One thing I'm going to do to them is I'm going to give them a little color correction because they're really white right now, and shotgun smoke, if you look at reference photos, uses sometimes black powder and looks a little blue. I want that effect, so I'm going to go into the effect color correction, CC toner again, and change the mid-tone to kind of a steely blue on that one. And then I'm going to basically Control C copy, Control V paste, so they both have the same look. See, it's got a little blue tint to them. I like that a lot better. Now we go to the distortion effect. The trails out here looking kind of funky here, and don't really know what they're for, right? Well, what we're going to use them for is to drive a distortion effect. So if you go to the raw footage, go to Effect, Distort, Displacement Map, you can come in here and select the displacement layer you want. We're going to use the trails, and if you'll turn off the trails, you can see, if we zoom in a little here, that you're driving some distortion. I'm going to jack this up a little bit so you can see it. As you can see, we're distorting the image below with all those little pellets. So if I hop between and the opacity here, you can see where the distortion is. One thing I don't like, though, is I don't like all the roundness. Some people might. I particularly don't care for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and add a blur to trails. Problem is, if I just add a blur on top of it right now in this comp, it's not going to affect the distortion or the displacement map, because I guess the displacement map looks to the footage without the effects applied. So the way we're going to get around this is we're going to go ahead and pre-comp the trails. So go Layer, Pre-Compose. I'm going to call this Trails Pre-Comp, and we're going to move all the attributes in new composition, even though there aren't any. But if you had already applied the blur, you'd want to do that. So now we want to Alt, double-click Trails, and we've got it. And we want to add just basically a fast blur. So select Trails, go Effect, Blur and Sharpen, Fast Blur, and we want to blur this out. We'll try 5 for now. So if we go back over to the footage, you can see that it's done a good job of really toning down the roundness of the distortion. And if we pan, you can see the nice distortion right there that you're getting coming off of those. So it looks pretty good. You can dial up the distortion if you really want a lot of it, or you really want to see it. You can really, make it really distorted. If you are going to do that, though, I would highly recommend blurring even more your trails pre-comp, so you get a smoother distortion look. I'm going to actually bring it back down to probably about 12, just to give it a nice effect. A couple of things left to do. First of all, I want to build a concussion wave coming out from the blast. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use an adjustment layer. So I'm going to go Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, and I'm going to call this Concussion, and I'm going to drop this below the trails and the pellets, but over top the smoke. And I'm going to add a new effect. Go to Effect, Distort, and I want a ripple effect. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the center right over top of the rings here, or right over top of the barrel, and I want to change a couple of these effects. I'm going to set the radius is what I'm going to actually change over time, so I'm going to drop down the effect twirl here, and the radius I'm going to keyframe, and I'm going to move back to frame 20, and I want the radius at 0, and then I'm going to move forward to 27, or 28 is fine. Set the radius to 20, and then I'm going to move on to frame 115 and set the radius back down to 0. So what we've got is just basically the distortion effect of a ripple going out from the center. I'm going to change the wave width to about 25 and leave the height at 20. It's fine. The wave speed I'm going to bring up to about 1.2. So if you'll look, we'll zoom in here and you'll see how you've got this rippling effect going on. That's kind of like a concussion wave going out. We have just a couple things left to do, and we've got this thing pretty well wrapped up. Last thing I'm going to do kind of in this comp is I'm going to add I'm going to color correct this shot so it looks a little edgier. I'm going to go to Effect, Color Correct, Curves. Something. And that looks pretty good. You can play with this however you want. I kind of like that look. Finally, I'm going to add a vignette, so I'm going to go to Layer, New, Solid. I don't want it pure black. I want kind of a dark orangey color for this to kind of play against that green. This looks pretty good. Make comp size, okay, and come in here, select the ellipse mask tool, double click it, go to the mask, and instead of add, go to subtract, go to the mask feather. I'm going to feather it out, let's see, 150. I'm going to go actually more like 200. And I'm going to bring the mask expansion actually out 50. And I don't want it that dark in the corners. I just want kind of a little darkening, so I'm going to actually pull up the opacity and dial it down to 25 and change it to a multiply. So if you look at the full size here, you can see how it's kind of just color correcting the corners and darkening them up a little bit and just giving you a little additional interest there. Okay, so the final thing we're going to do is we're going to remap the time on this so that we kind of have it faster at the beginning and then slowing up. But first let's do a quick RAM preview and see how this looks. I'm going to pause it while it previews. Okay, we got the RAM preview done here, and this is what we look like so far. There we go. Looking pretty good. I did notice one thing I forgot to mention, forgot to do. If you scrub through here to where the pellets and the distortion is going over the sides, you'll see how it's kind of pulling a little bit and distorting this, and underneath we have black. You don't really want that because it's going to basically mess with how the shot looks. So there's an easy way to fix that. What we need to do is go back down to the raw footage, and we want to add a motion tile. So come over to Effects and Presets, go to Motion Tile right here, and drag that on. And for the motion tile, you want to bring it up above the distortion, or else not going, or the displacement, or it's not going to do any good. So we'll bring it up here. We're going to turn on mirror edges and go to about 120 by 120. And as you can see, it automatically takes care of that little area, so we no longer have that problem. So now we're going to add the final element, which is the time. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename the raw footage pre-comp to main comp, and I'm going to take it and make a new comp out of it, and I'm going to rename this final comp, the infamous final comp. So we've got this nested, looks good, and now we need to time remap. So we're going to go to Layer, Time, Enable Time Remapping, and we're going to move to about a second right here, and then click the stopwatch, and then move further down the line to about 220 and set a keyframe. And basically what we're doing is setting these keyframes where this is the particular frame and time that you're going to be adjusting. So when you move this keyframe closer, you're compressing time here and lengthening time here. So it's going to be faster through here, through between these two frames when you move them, and slower through the middle. So we're going to be moving this keyframe back to about frame 9 is what I want it. Move in. Nine or 10 is fine. And then the other one, the back frame, we're going to move this one closer to about 3.4. 3 seconds, 4 frames. So what we have now is we've compressed the time at the front so it's faster at the front, and then slows down, it's faster at the back. The problem is, if you look at the graph, it's kind of wacky, and we want to definitely adjust the graph so that it's a lot smoother. The way you can do that is by adjusting the handles to kind of smooth out the curve. So come in here and we want to select all the keyframes and hit F9, and then we'll go to the graph view, and if you select one, you can see you have all of these handles that you can drag and drop and play with now. I'm going to try to free up a little real estate here so we can get a better look at this. So we're going to smooth this keyframe out and smooth this one out so it kind of comes in, goes out fast, and then kind of slows down in the middle. And then we're going to basically smooth this out through the middle here. So a nice smooth interpolation. I think that looks pretty good. Now let's do another RAM preview and see what it looks like. And let's see what we got. I like it. It starts off fast, kind of slows down, and then as it gets towards the end, towards the camera, it speeds back up. The last thing that I would do to this is add a kind of a fade in and a fade out, just to kind of finish the shot off. I'm going to add a new solid layer. I'm going to choose black. I'm going to make comp size. Pop this up top. I'm going to rename this fade. Turn off the graph editor. And I'm basically just going to go through and transform the opacity, set keyframe for 100, move in a few frames, drop it down to 0, and then come over on the back side and just a couple frames to fade. So set a keyframe, and then on the last one bring the opacity all the way up to 100. And I really only want about 2 frames of fading out. I want to be really quick. I don't want to take away from any of the other cool effects we've done. So just on, there we go. That looks pretty good. So we'll pause for one last RAM preview, and then we'll wrap it up. Alright, let's see what we got here. The only critiques that I might have would be the bullets are traveling really slow in the middle, and you're getting a little bit of a stop motion. You can go ahead and fix that, and instead of lengthening the comp, since we've already slowed it down quite a bit, you can shorten the comp and actually just crush the front times by bringing the endpoints in instead of bringing the middle out. I'd probably recommend, if I had to go back and do it, to do it that way, because it's slow enough as it is. Other than that, I think we're pretty much there. Thanks for listening, and if you guys would like any more 3D Max crossover with After Effects tutorials in the future, give me some feedback on what you might like or what you're looking for, and I'll see if I can't help you out. It's been a pleasure, and I will see you all later.